Oh, hey. So I heard that you want to make bread. Well, I'm here to help you with that. Now, bread making is one of the most versatile cooking skills you could possibly develop, whether it be for baked goods, school lunches, i.e. the bread for their sandwiches, or any other various products such as... But regardless of your reasoning for wanting to make bread, whether it's a new hobby, you're trying to save a quick buck, or just live a healthier lifestyle, in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to get started on your new yeasted journey. Come on. Now, when it comes to making bread, there are a few ingredients you're always going to need. They're used in pretty much every single recipe. And the number one ingredient is going to be your flour. Now, you want to make sure you get a high quality bread flour. Personally, I recommend King Arthur's bread flour. This one's a great one to use because it already includes malted barley and other things that are going to help with the color, flavor, and texture of your bread. They have this at most stores, so go to your flour section in the baking aisle, take a look for it. Just make sure you get their bread flour for today's recipe. Now, you're also usually going to need some salt. Personally, any salt will work. I like to use sea salt or Himalayan pink salt because it's a little bit more forgiving on the saltiness side. Okay? And then you're always gonna need yeast unless you're making unfermented dough, but we're not touching on that today. I like to use this brand, and I usually use active dry yeast. When you go to the store, you can get this in packets or in a jar like this. It really just depends how much baking you're gonna be doing. Just make sure you get active dry yeast and not bread machine yeast or instant yeast. Those will work, but for best effects and to really learn the knowledge needed to create your own recipes, you wanna use something like this or an active starter that you make yourself. Usually gonna need some form of sugar, whether it be granulated sugar, honey, or something similar, another syrup, you're just always gonna need it. And then water. You can use the stuff from your sink. I don't think it really matters. Now, I've made sure this first recipe is perfect for a beginner. It's very easy to make, but still includes some slightly more advanced techniques such as enriching. Don't worry, I'll hold your hand through it. For this recipe, we're gonna need 3/4 cup or 174 grams of water, a half cup or 125 grams of whole milk, 1 packet or 9 grams of active yeast, 3 cups 440 grams of bread flour, 1.5 teaspoons or 8 grams of our salt, and 1 teaspoon or 21 grams of granulated sugar. We're also going to need 3 tablespoons of unsalted butter. We want that softened, so leave it on the counter while you're doing all the beginning stuff, okay? Very important. The first things we're gonna do is we're going to add our water. We wanna make sure this is warm, about 100 degrees. You don't want it too hot or you will kill the yeast, okay? Then we're going to add our sugar, and we're gonna add our yeast. We're gonna give this a quick mix and let it sit for about 10 minutes. This is called blooming the yeast. We wanna make sure it's still alive, active, and strong. So I'll be right back at ya. Once your yeast is done fermenting, it should look like this, fairly bubbly, a little brown, and you should also be able to smell it. It's an indistinguishable smell. Once you get to this step, you're ready to move on to the next. All right, now's the time where if you got a stand mixer, you're gonna wanna whip it out. You don't really need it, but it gets too advanced if you're a beginner to do this by hand. So if you don't have one, run it over to Walmart, Amazon, wherever. This one's like 60 bucks. Pick it up, it's worth it. All right, so from here, we're going to add our flour directly into our yeast mixture. Okay, get all that in there. No spillage on the counter. Then we're going to add our salt. Right in there on top of the flour. And we're gonna set this to medium-low speed at first. And let that go for about 10 minutes. Alright, so after 8 to 10 minutes, you should have a shaggy dough that looks like this. And that's how you know we're ready to add the milk and butter. We're gonna do these one at a time with the mixer going. We're going to slowly stream them in, and then for the butters, put small amounts at a time. We want to fully incorporate this into our dough. We're going to have our mixer on medium speed, about 5.
Alright, at this point you might be thinking you ruined the dough because it looks horrible. It's falling apart, it's super chunky, and it looks like it can never come together. But you know what? Just wait, give it a chance. I promise, it's gonna come together. Just give it time.
Okay, after anywhere from about 10 to 20 minutes, your dough should be done. The way you know it's done is it's fully congealed, it's one consistency, it doesn't really look gritty. You want it to be smooth, and then if you grab the edge of it, it should stretch without breaking. So it looks like we need probably 4 to 5 more minutes. I'll be right back at you after that. And with that, our dough is done. So we're gonna go ahead and open our mixer and pop it out of the bowl. Make sure you grab any remnants left on your dough hook. And from there, we have our dough. Okay? So from here, things can be a little hard, but if you follow along, it'll go nice and smooth. So we're gonna take our dough, we're gonna turn it over. We're gonna push it out just a little bit flat. Check that texture, make sure we get a good pull. It's how we know we mixed properly. Okay, we're gonna take this, we're gonna fold in each corner, turning it in a circle, everything in the middle, turn it over. We're gonna use our hand to apply pressure, downward pressure, through the dough into the cutting board, counter, or whatever surface you're using. And then, when we get to this point, we're gonna pull backwards, rotating it. We're just gonna do that over and over a couple times until we get a nice smooth ball. Okay? If you see tearing up here, you're going too far. You need to stop. Now we're gonna take this ball, we're gonna put it back in a bowl. All right, once we have this in our bowl, we're gonna make sure that our seam side where we folded everything is face down. And we're gonna cover this bowl with either a wet towel or saran wrap. Now that our dough has rested for about 30 minutes, it should be nice, plush, soft, congealed, and a little bit bigger. We're gonna go ahead and take this out of the bowl and get it back onto our work surface. Now that we have the dough on our work surface, we need to think about what pan we're going to be using. This is the one I'm gonna be using today. Right here on the screen, I will put a calculation for how much dough you need to use for your size pan. Very simple, go ahead and plug in your numbers and figure out how much you need. Using a serrated knife, we're gonna go ahead and portion our dough out to the amount we need for our loaf pan. You can set aside your extra dough for the moment. We're gonna take our main piece, flip it over. We're gonna make a Dorito. We're gonna turn this into a bit of a triangle, okay? Now for this dough, you shouldn't need to flour your work surface as it's not super sticky or super wet. It should be very easy for you to work with. Once we get this into a triangle, we're gonna flatten this down to about an inch, half an inch or so, keeping it even and uniform. Pull the tips out a bit. We're gonna fold just the edges in. We're gonna take our tip, we're gonna take these fingers, we're gonna take our tip and we're gonna make that motion, right? Then we're gonna push it back into itself. Now we're just gonna do that over and over until we get a cylinder. Being careful to apply pressure where needed so that the thickness stays even throughout the loaf. Once we get to the point where we're about to be able to seal it, we're gonna take our whole hands and use our thumb to do the same thing, pushing it into the seam. We want this seam to be nice and closed. We're gonna pull that using the board for friction. Okay, and once you see this, this is our seam. It should be nice and straight for the most part, you know, and closed up. We can pinch that together if we want, just to ensure it's nice and sealed. Okay, there we go. We have our cylinder. Okay, so we're gonna take our loaf pan. We're gonna go ahead and set that in here, and we are going to cover this again with a damp cloth. Now we're gonna add a deep pan to the oven, fill it to about 1 inch to 2 inches of water, and preheat our oven to 350 degrees. Now we're gonna go ahead and set our loaf on top of a pan, a wire rack, or something that can provide some elevation on top of our preheating oven. This is gonna allow it to get warmer and to rise a bit faster. because it really depends on the temperature of your house. Like this, it should take about 30-45 minutes. By the time your oven is preheated, it should be about ready. Now you're probably wondering what to do with this extra dough. There are plenty of things you could do. I recommend just making a couple hamburger buns. Now to do that, we're gonna take this, we're gonna cut it to be about 8-ounce pieces. And this one will probably get about 3. Okay, we're gonna take these pieces, we're gonna take our fingers, we're gonna push in right here, okay, and make a little pocket like that. And we're gonna push everything inside to the center like we did in the beginning. Except for this time, we want this to be tighter. So when we turn it over, we're gonna use our hand, really get into that motion of making the ball. And always be sure to apply pressure to the center. That way, we have a clean seam. We're gonna keep going till this is perfectly shaped. Okay. Then take that, put it on a baking sheet. Bam. Let's do the other 2. And when we're done, we should have a pretty even seam. We can pinch that shut, put seam side down on a baking sheet, and you're good to go to put that in with your other loaf once they're proofed. Now this step isn't required, but trust me, you're gonna wanna do it. So you're gonna take an egg, pack that in a container, add a little bit of water, about 2 tablespoons or so. Mix that up. Now, we're gonna take our mixture and we're gonna paint the whole surface of our loaf with it. Don't miss any spots, don't go too thick. You want this even and all around. Now we're gonna take our loaf and put it in our preheated oven for 35 to 40 minutes on the upper rack, dead center. And after that time is up, you're gonna have a beautiful loaf of fresh white bread. Slice this, put jelly on it, make French toast, or just use it for sandwiches or eat it straight. The choice is really up to you. Just make sure you don't cut it until it fully cools down. Otherwise, you're gonna have a mess on your hands.